If you're on the same side of the internet I am, you've probably seen the joke about boomers selling their homes for like $2 million after buying them in 1969 for a few raspberries, or a bushel of corn, or a few nickels. Let's lock in. You want to know why Gen Z is spellbound by socialism these days? It all comes down to the housing crisis. That is, the shortage of affordable housing. The cherry on top, President Trump has just recommended that banks offer 50-year mortgages. 50 years.
The 30-year mortgage has been a staple of American homeownership dating back to Franklin Roosevelt. Now the Trump administration is talking about a 50-year version designed to help millennials and Gen Z buyers navigate high prices and interest rates.
Gen Z has a feeling of intergenerational theft. They feel like their parents, Gen X, and their grandparents, the boomers and the greatest generation, got to enjoy the American dream. We were told, if you work hard, you too can enjoy the American dream. That's a wraparound porch and a white picket fence and a golden retriever on your front yard, private property, land, room to roam. And Trump knows that housing is unaffordable these days, and this issue is going to hit Republicans where it hurts.
Over the weekend, you may have heard President Trump floated the idea for a 50-year mortgage. Now, on the surface, it is meant to save potential homeowners hundreds of dollars a month in payments, but the proposal has also received a lot of criticism.
We kids just might be renters forever. The median age of first-time home buyers hit 38 last year, up from 35 in 2023. And almost a decade older than in the 1980s, when the typical home buyer was just 29, according to the National Association of Realtors. So we Gen Z are going to likely be pushing 40 years old when we decide to get our first property. And even beyond ownership of a home, the rent is also just too dang high, especially in deep blue cities like New York, where I live, where there's a lot of restrictions on new buildings. And if the rent is high, you can't save for a down payment. The down payment on a house within commuting distance, New York City, around the tri-state area right now, is 20% of often $1 million. That's $200,000 to get the keys to the front door. The nation's housing market remains just far out of reach for many would-be buyers, like hopefully myself one day, and there doesn't seem to be a correction coming anytime soon. Some reasons for the housing crisis are natural, some even good, don't get me wrong. Homes have more amenities these days, they're more advanced, and they're bigger. The American homes have risen in quality over the past 75 years. Homes are dramatically larger. In 1950, the average house was 983 square feet. In 2025, the median home is 1,800 square feet. So that's an 83% increase in space. It makes sense that the prices have gone up as a reflection of that. And another reason, over time, people have become concentrated in urban areas. In 1950, 64% of Americans lived in urban areas, and that jumped to 83.3% in 2023. Cities and their close suburbs have way more access to goods and services, but space is obviously limited, and as a result, prices go up. If you're more cramped, there's only so much surface area on the island of Manhattan, and I assume you can't just keep building up into the stratosphere, so yeah, prices will go up. However, only a quarter of the price increases in homes is attributable to quality improvements, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And from 1977 to 2000, homes actually got cheaper for the median family. But this started to get out of whack in the 2000s because incomes were just not keeping up with home price increases.
You smell that? What is that?
What?
What's that smell?
A cologne?
No.
Opportunity.
No. Money.
Oh, okay.
I smell money.
Okay.
Chris?
Then came 2008. The government at the time was obsessed with issuing subprime mortgages in the mid-2000s. That is, mortgages for people with really bad credit, people who were likely to default on their loans.
Sorry.
This is your basic mortgage bond. All right? The originals were simple. They were just Thousands of AAA mortgages bundled together, guaranteed by the U.S. government. The modern ones are different. They're private, and they're made up of layers of tranches.
A lot of these banks saw the opportunity to make a quick buck on the backs of people who were down on their luck, didn't mean to rhyme there, so they kept issuing them.
The highest level AAAs getting paid first, the lowest rated Bs getting paid last, taking on defaults first. Now, obviously, if you're buying Bs, you can make more money, but they're a little risky.
So the government artificially drove up demand for home buying, and it kept snowballing. Eventually, as you can imagine, the bubble had to pop, and it did. The Great Recession.
Sell it all today.
Is that even possible, Sam?
Yes, but at what cost?
The Federal Reserve said, well, this is bad. We have to stimulate economic activity. We need businesses to invest and to hire again. So the Fed drove down interest rates, like to the floor, to make borrowing cheaper. We now call that the era of easy money because it was like water. It was so easy to get credit if you wanted it. The Fed also did something controversial called quantitative easing. I used to be a monetary policy nerd, so bear with me. This is when the Fed bought up a boatload of those troubled mortgage-backed securities to give liquidity to the banks and the financial institutions that were holding all this stuff. And it was garbage, like really poorly rated loans. And what the Fed did was inject more money into the economy, again, artificially, and that drove interest rates down even more. We're talking like rock bottom. And when interest rates go down, prices go up. So housing prices soared. So that's what we're dealing with now, is all this demand for housing fueled by the Fed's easy money, but supply was not keeping up. And since the mid-20th century, zoning and land use regulations have only increased. More red tape, fewer houses being built, less construction, you get the picture. Now Gen Z feels like there's no chance of home ownership in our lifetimes without another market crash. Both sides in Washington are scrambling to figure this out, but so far, nothing great.
The elections will be decisive in the battle for control of Congress, but both parties have major issues to consider as they plot their path forward. Voters are still searching for answers on cost of living, health care, and more.
The goal right now for both parties is to win Gen Z at the ballot box, and to do that, they need to alleviate their biggest financial insecurity, homeownership, or the possibility that it may never happen for them. So Trump announced he's working on a 50-year mortgage. What this means is that the monthly payment for a home is going to be pretty low. Definitely less than, say, a 15-year or 30-year mortgage. But in response to Trump's proposal, you'd think young people would say, finally, a chance to own a home. But actually, it's going to make the housing crisis worse. Under this plan, Gen Z will be debtors forever. And some debt is good, but get this, we would be paying mostly interest for over a decade of this mortgage. That's so discouraging, so dehumanizing even. I said this on Fox Business the other day.
50-year mortgage. Technically, I think it would bring down your monthly payment, but is it appealing to that younger voter, that younger person who wants to get into a home?
Well, first thing I'll say is that a 50-year mortgage will dispense of the idea that eventually you will own your home. Right. And you, for over a decade, you're going to be paying mostly interest on that home. So that's kind of an alarming statistic as well. But the instincts here from...
But are young voters doing the math like that, or are they just saying, I could finally afford to get into a home?
Well, so here's what I'll say about Gen Z. For Trump to do this, his instincts are smart, given Mom Downey's win among Gen Z voters in New York City. There is real generational pain among Gen Z. We feel like we've been priced out of the real estate market. You see all these memes on social media that are something to the effect of the baby boomers are celebrating the sale of the $3.2 million property, which they bought in 1969 for 3 raspberries or a bushel of corn or a couple nickels. That's the sense of intergenerational theft that Gen Z feels. But the problem is that this is going to perpetuate this vicious cycle of government intervention, as we were saying before, and it's just continuing to dump trillions of dollars on the subsidized housing market, which is only going to increase demand. It does nothing to address supply. So I think what we should be asking for Gen Z's sake is, how are we fixing the supply crisis, which is probably regulations for home builders.
Now, there's a progressive phrase associated with a 2016 World Economic Forum essay by Ida Auken. You'll own nothing and be happy. This is a fundamentally un-American idea, but the 50-year mortgage kind of channels that. Look, as Americans, we believe that you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor in private property, in owning land and a home that is yours and yours alone. It's even a bulwark against government encroachment. Sure, you can say it takes a village and community ties are important, but we're also individuals who crave autonomy as well as stability to grow. That's what a home is. Also, by owning a home, you're more likely to want to contribute to the community around you for the sake of you and your children. But what do you think? Trump's a businessman. He had plenty of properties himself. I know he knows what he's talking about. Could a 50-year mortgage be the solution that might allow a Gen Zer like me to own a home before I start graying? Or is there a better solution? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And please give us a like, subscribe, and click that notification bell.